The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Neutral Zone had never witnessed such a gathering. Carved from a hollowed asteroid drifting in the void between star systems, its crystalline walls now contained representatives from 42 distinct species, the most comprehensive alliance in galactic history. The year was 2394 CE by human reckoning, though none of the assembled beings bothered with such primitive timekeeping. Ambassador Crixtal of the Mantid Collective stood at the central podium, her chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the hall's bioluminescent lighting. Four arms gestured with practiced precision as she addressed the gathering, each movement synchronized with the collective consciousness of her species. Honored delegates, her voice resonated through both audible frequencies and psychic wavelengths, we face an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. General Vorth AK of the Draconian Empire shifted his massive, scaled bulk in his reinforced seat. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with wings that could span a small spacecraft, he embodied millennia of martial tradition. His golden eyes, each the size of a human head, fixed on the holographic display floating above the assembly. These, humans, he rumbled, the word dripping with disdain, spread like a plague across our territories. Their expansion threatens the order we have maintained for 10,000 years. Beside him, Counselor Zephyr of the Ethereal Consortium existed as barely more than a shimmer of organized energy, her thoughts rippling through dimensions that matter-based beings could barely perceive. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Their minds are chaotic, unpredictable. They think as individuals rather than unified consciousness. It is disturbing. The intelligence reports holographically projected for all to witness painted a clear picture of humanity's rapid expansion. In merely 3 centuries since achieving faster-than-light travel, humans had established colonies on over 200 worlds. Their population growth was exponential, their resource consumption voracious, their diplomatic approach frustratingly inconsistent. They are clearly primitive, observed the representative from the Silicon Brotherhood, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. Kinetic weapons. Chemical propulsion. Individual decision-making processes. They barely qualify as a spacefaring civilization. A chorus of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Aquatic Federation delegate's translation unit bubbled as she spoke from her environmental tank. Our preliminary scouts report they become emotional under stress. Irrational. In our experience, such species burn themselves out within a few centuries. Ambassador Crixtal's compound eyes surveyed the gathering. The collective consciousness of her species had already reached consensus, as it always did, seamlessly and efficiently. The motion before us is clear. Humanity represents a destabilizing force that threatens galactic civilization. Their expansion must be curtailed. Curtailed? General Vorth AK's laugh was like grinding stone. You mean eliminated? Let us speak plainly, Ambassador. We are discussing the complete eradication of the human species. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. For a moment, even the psychic communion between species fell silent. Then, one by one, the delegates began to nod their agreement, or their species' equivalent gesture of consent. The vote was unanimous. 42 species against 1. It should be over in 72 hours, General Vorth AK declared with the confidence of a being whose species had conquered half a galaxy. We possess 50,000 warships to their mere 2,000. Our energy weapons can vaporize their kinetic defenses. Our psychic coordination will overwhelm their chaotic individual thinking. This will not be a war, it will be an extermination. The assembled delegates began their preparations, already calculating the distribution of former human territories. None of them had ever actually fought humans before. None of them had studied human history beyond the most cursory intelligence reports. None of them understood what they had just declared war upon. In the depths of space, the greatest military miscalculation in galactic history had just been made. World-building and false confidence. The Galactic Coalition represented the pinnacle of organized civilization. 42 species, each having evolved along different paths, had nonetheless achieved similar heights of technological and social development. The Mantid collective operated through perfect hive-mind coordination, with billions of individuals sharing thoughts instantaneously across vast distances. The Draconian Empire combined overwhelming physical power with advanced energy weapons that could crack planets. The ethereal consortium existed partially outside normal spacetime, manipulating reality through pure thought. Each species had spent millennia perfecting their approach to warfare. The Aquatic Federation's living ships could regenerate battle damage in real time. The Silicon Brotherhood's crystalline vessels were virtually indestructible, their crews thinking at the speed of light through quantum crystalline matrices. The Void Dancers existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. Against this overwhelming force, humanity fielded approximately 2,000 ships of various classes. Their weapons were embarrassingly primitive: kinetic projectiles propelled by chemical explosives, nuclear missiles that wouldn't penetrate modern shielding, and laser arrays that barely qualified as point defense systems. Human ships were slow, clunky, and required massive crews compared to the elegant automation of their alien counterparts. The intelligence reports were unanimous in their assessment. Humans were emotional creatures, prone to panic and irrational decision-making under pressure. Their short lifespans, barely a century, meant they lacked the long-term strategic thinking that species with millennial perspectives could achieve. They showed disturbing signs of individual initiative rather than proper collective consciousness, leading to inefficient command structures and contradictory orders. Most damning of all, Earth's diplomatic stance had been consistently peaceful. When territorial disputes arose, humans typically sought negotiation over conflict. They had never initiated a major war of conquest, preferring trade and cultural exchange. To the coalition, this appeared to be cowardice masquerading as civilization. General Vorthake had studied every major galactic conflict of the past 5,000 years. In each case, victory had gone to the side with superior numbers, better technology, and more disciplined coordination. The Draconian Empire had built its reputation on overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. When they brought 50 dreadnoughts to crush a single world's defenses, resistance typically collapsed before the first shot was fired. Ambassador Kriegstall's collective consciousness had processed battle scenarios numbering in the millions. In every simulation, human resistance lasted no more than a few days. Their primitive weapons could not penetrate modern shielding. Their emotional instability would lead to command breakdown under pressure. Their individual decision-making would create chaos in their own ranks long before alien forces needed to intervene. Counselor Zephyr had attempted to probe human minds from a distance, but found them unsettling. Where proper species maintained orderly thought patterns, the collective harmony of hive minds, the crystalline logic of silicon-based consciousness, the flowing unity of energy beings, human minds were chaotic storms of competing ideas, emotions, and impulses. It was like trying to read the thoughts of a malfunctioning computer. Clearly, this mental disorder would be a fatal weakness in organized combat. What none of the coalition intelligence services had done was study human history in any meaningful depth. Their reports focused on the last 3 centuries of human space expansion, a period marked by exploration, colonization, and relatively peaceful development. They had not examined the previous 10,000 years of human civilization, during which Homo sapiens had clawed their way to the top of their planet's evolutionary hierarchy through constant, brutal competition. They did not know that humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey for days across impossible terrain. They did not understand that human, emotional instability, was actually a complex adaptive system that allowed for rapid response to changing circumstances. They had not studied the human concept of total war, the complete mobilization of entire populations for survival. Most critically, they did not realize that humanity's peaceful expansion into space had been possible precisely because there had been no significant external threats to trigger their deepest survival instincts. The coalition was about to provide that threat. Rising action, First Contact War. The assault began at exactly 0000 hours Galactic Standard Time across 12 human frontier colonies simultaneously. General Vorthake had planned the operation as a demonstration of overwhelming force, a quick, decisive blow that would shatter human morale and bring about immediate surrender. The first target was New Prosperity, a mining colony in the Kepler 442 system. Home to 50,000 humans extracting rare metals from asteroid fields, it should have been defenseless against the 15 coalition warships that emerged from hyperspace. The colonists had perhaps an hour to contemplate their fate before the inevitable surrender demand. Instead, every mining platform in the system opened fire. The weapons were improvised, industrial mining lasers recalibrated for combat, mass drivers loaded with raw or instead of processing materials, and construction charges rigged as missiles. None of them should have posed any threat to military-grade vessels with energy shielding. The first Draconian heavy cruiser lost its forward sensor array when a mining laser, boosted beyond safe parameters, punched through its shields with raw power that exceeded all tactical projections. The second ship found its engine section compromised when the colonists launched a cargo container filled with construction explosives and metal debris, a weapon so primitive it bypassed sophisticated point defense systems designed to intercept proper missiles. But it was the human response that truly shocked the coalition forces. Instead of surrender, the colonists fought with a desperate ferocity that defied all psychological profiles. Entire families worked together to operate jury-rigged weapons. Children as young as 10 years old served as ammunition runners while their parents fired mining equipment that had been converted into improvised artillery. When coalition marines finally boarded the mining stations, they encountered something no galactic species had seen in millennia: total resistance. Every human they encountered fought to the death. Maintenance workers attacked armored soldiers with improvised weapons. Elderly colonists rigged explosives to take enemy forces with them. The concept of civilian noncombatants seemed to be completely alien to human thinking. Captain Zalmoth of the Ethereal Consortium tried to use psychic domination to force surrender, only to discover that human minds under extreme stress became even more chaotic and unpredictable. Instead of the ordered capitulation he expected, the mental contact left him reeling from the sheer intensity of human desperation and rage. The pattern repeated across all 12 colonies. What should have been a 4-hour demonstration of force stretched into 3 days of grinding, vicious combat. Coalition casualties mounted steadily as humans employed tactics that no civilized species would consider: suicide attacks, booby traps in civilian areas, the complete militarization of industrial infrastructure. On Kepler 442, the human colonists' final act was to destabilize the system's star using their mining equipment, forcing the coalition fleet to retreat or be destroyed in the resulting stellar flare. 50,000 humans died, but they took 2 coalition warships and over 1,000 enemy soldiers with them. The first reports reaching Admiral Sarah Kane, commander of the Earth Defense Force, painted a clear picture. These weren't raids or territorial disputes, this was a war of extermination. Every human colony had been targeted simultaneously. Every attack had been launched without warning or demand for surrender. Kane had spent her career preparing for threats that might never come. Her official record showed a competent but unremarkable officer who had risen through the ranks during peacetime. What the coalition didn't know was that Kane had spent decades studying every recorded conflict in human history, developing tactical doctrines based on humanity's unique evolutionary advantages. The response was swift and decisive. Within hours of the first attacks, every human colony in space had been placed under military authority. The distinction between civilian and military infrastructure disappeared overnight as entire populations mobilized for war. General Marcus Webb, Earth's leading expert in asymmetric warfare, took command of colonial defense forces. His orders were simple: make the enemy pay for every meter of space. If a colony couldn't be held, it would be denied to the enemy through any means necessary. Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of the Human Military Research Division, began the largest crash weapons development program in galactic history. Her teams had captured alien technology from the first attacks, and she had given them 72 hours to reverse engineer anything useful. The coalition had expected quick victory. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that fought like cornered animals, except these animals had industrial technology, military organization, and an apparent complete disregard for their own survival when their species was threatened. For the first time in 5,000 years, a coalition military operation had failed to achieve its objectives. The shock rippled through the Galactic Alliance as reports filtered back to their homeworlds. General Vorthake stared at casualty reports that made no sense. How had primitive kinetic weapons penetrated energy shields? How had untrained civilians outfought professional soldiers? How had the humans turned simple mining equipment into effective weapons of war? The answer was terrifying in its simplicity: humans had evolved for exactly this kind of desperate, adaptive combat. Every human carried the genetic memory of 10,000 years of warfare. Every human child grew up absorbing stories of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. The coalition had expected to fight another civilized species. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, the apex predator instincts of a species that had clawed its way to dominance on one of the galaxy's most competitive worlds. Unexpected human tactics. The psychological warfare began 3 days after the initial attacks. Coalition fleet commanders across 12 systems found their communication networks flooded with transmissions from Earth, not military communications, but something far more disturbing. Humans were broadcasting their entertainment. Admiral Thexra of the Aquatic Federation watched in horrified fascination as her translation systems processed something called Aliens vs. Predator. The film depicted humanity's casual entertainment involving species that hunted sapient beings for sport, while humans fought back with primitive weapons and pure determination. Her tactical staff fell silent as they realized humans had been imagining scenarios like their current situation for centuries, and in their fantasies, humans always found a way to win. General Vorthake's command staff compiled reports from Earth's entertainment archives. Thousands of films, books, games, and simulations all focused on humanity facing extinction-level threats. Alien invasions, robotic uprisings, demonic incursions, zombie apocalypses, human culture was saturated with survival scenarios that would traumatize most civilized species. Worse, these weren't cautionary tales about the futility of resistance. They were instruction manuals. "They enjoy this," whispered Captain Mordun of the Silicon Brotherhood, his crystalline form flickering with distress patterns. Their young consume these scenarios as entertainment. They fantasize about fighting impossible odds. Counselor Zephyr attempted to analyze the psychological profiles embedded in human media. What she found defied comprehension. Humans didn't just imagine surviving catastrophic threats, they imagined thriving under pressure. Their heroes were individuals who saved their species through personal sacrifice, tactical innovation, and sheer bloody-minded determination. The entertainment broadcasts were just the beginning. Dr. Elena Vasquez's research teams had worked around the clock to analyze captured coalition technology, and their first breakthrough was both elegant and terrifying. Human engineers had reverse-engineered alien energy shielding, but instead of copying it directly, they had weaponized the underlying principles. The shield buster was embarrassingly simple, a kinetic projectile wrapped in a low-level energy field that resonated at the same frequency as coalition shielding. When it struck, the projectile's energy signature convinced the shield that it was friendly technology, allowing the physical component to pass through and strike the hull at relativistic velocities. Coalition fleets discovered this innovation when the human colony at Wolf 359 successfully destroyed 3 draconian battleships using converted cargo vessels equipped with the new weapons. The sight of massive warships being crippled by primitive, kinetic weapons sent shockwaves through the alien command structure. Admiral Kane's strategic doctrine was equally innovative. Instead of the centralized command structures favored by galactic civilization, human fleets operated on what she called chaos theory principles. Each ship captain was given broad objectives but complete tactical autonomy. No 2 human vessels employed the same approach to any given situation. This created a nightmare scenario for coalition commanders used to fighting predictable enemies. Draconian doctrine was based on overwhelming force applied systematically. Mantid tactics relied on perfect coordination between all units. Ethereal strategy depended on psychic prediction of enemy movements. Human, chaos doctrine made all of these approaches useless. When a coalition task force engaged the human defense fleet at Proxima Centauri, they faced 12 different tactical approaches simultaneously. One human ship charged directly at the enemy battle line, weapons blazing. Another launched missiles and then retreated beyond sensor range. A third played dead until coalition forces came within close-range weapon systems. A fourth used its cargo bays to deploy hundreds of armed shuttles that swarmed the enemy formation like angry insects. The coalition force, expecting unified human tactics, found their own coordination breaking down as they tried to respond to 12 different threats simultaneously. Draconian ships found themselves isolated when they charged forward. Manted vessels lost collective harmony as individual units were forced to make independent decisions. Ethereal commanders discovered that predicting human actions was impossible when humans themselves didn't know what they were going to do until they did it. But it was General Webb's total war doctrine that truly shocked the galactic community. Every human settlement, no matter how small or seemingly defenseless, became a military target, and every human civilian became a combatant. The coalition learned this when they attempted to capture the agricultural colony at Gliese 667c. The planet was home to 3 million farmers and had no visible military installations. It should have been an easy occupation that would provide food supplies for coalition forces. Instead, the occupation force found themselves fighting a war against the planet itself. Farmers had converted crop-dusting aircraft into improvised attack vehicles. Agricultural chemicals became weapons of mass destruction when properly deployed. Automated farming equipment was reprogrammed to hunt coalition forces. Even the planet's domesticated animals had been trained to attack alien soldiers. Children too young to carry weapons served as intelligence networks, reporting enemy movements through communication systems hidden in everything from toys to farm equipment. Elderly colonists who couldn't fight directly became weapons manufacturers, turning household chemicals and farming supplies into explosives and poisons. The occupation lasted exactly 18 hours before coalition forces retreated, having lost nearly a quarter of their personnel to an enemy that seemed to consist of the entire planetary population. Coalition intelligence services began studying human history more carefully, and what they discovered was profoundly disturbing. Humans had been practicing total war for millennia. When facing extinction, they didn't just mobilize their armies, they mobilized their entire species. Every human became a combatant, every human settlement became a fortress, every human resource became a weapon. The psychological impact on coalition forces was devastating. They had expected to fight soldiers and conquer civilians. Instead, they found themselves at war with an entire species that refused to acknowledge any distinction between combatant and non-combatant. Morale reports from coalition fleets painted a grim picture. Soldiers accustomed to fighting civilized wars found themselves psychologically unprepared for human tactics. The Draconian Empire's honor-based military culture couldn't comprehend an enemy that would use wounded children as bait for ambushes. The Manted Collective's hive-mind coordination faltered when faced with opponents who seemed genuinely insane by galactic standards. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a technologically superior force was being systematically outfought by a primitive enemy. The coalition's assumptions about warfare, civilization, and species behavior were crumbling under the reality of what humans were willing to do to survive. Climax: the Great Reversal Operation Prometheus launched exactly 1 month after the coalition's first attacks. The name itself was chosen deliberately, humans stealing fire from the gods, no matter the consequences. Admiral Kane had spent weeks studying every piece of intelligence her forces had gathered about coalition worlds, and her plan was audacious beyond anything attempted in galactic military history. Humanity would attack 42 homeworlds simultaneously. The logistics alone should have been impossible. Human space forces numbered only 2,000 ships, while the coalition could field 50,000. The distances involved spanned half the galaxy. The coordination required would challenge even the most advanced hive-mind civilizations. Kane's solution was typically human: don't coordinate at all. Each strike force was given complete autonomy, supplied with whatever intelligence was available about their target, and told to cause maximum disruption using whatever methods they deemed appropriate. No two fleets received the same tactical guidelines. No central command structure existed to be decapitated. Each human force was expected to adapt to local conditions and improvise solutions using nothing but their species' evolutionary advantages. The effect was devastating precisely because it was unpredictable. The assault on the Draconian Empire's capital world began when Captain Rodriguez's strike force emerged from hyperspace, not in the outer system where any sane military force would establish a beachhead, but directly in orbit around the planet itself. The human fleet had spent 3 weeks traveling through hyperspace using a route that should have been suicidal, passing through the gravitational field of a black hole to achieve a trajectory that no conventional navigation system could calculate. General Vorthake's planetary defenses had been designed to repel attacks from beyond the system's heliopause, not from orbit around the homeworld itself. Before the massive defensive platforms could rotate to target the human ships, Rodriguez had deployed every missile her fleet carried directly into the planet's atmosphere. The missiles weren't carrying conventional warheads. Dr. Vasquez's teams had loaded them with a far more insidious payload, Earth's entertainment broadcasts, translated into every major Draconian dialect and transmitted on all available frequencies. Every Draconian on the planet found themselves watching human war films, horror movies, and survival documentaries. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Draconian culture was based on honor, individual combat, and glorious victory. Humans showed them industrialized warfare, total species mobilization, and victory through any means necessary. The broadcasts didn't just show human determination, they showed human imagination applied to the problem of killing enemies more efficiently. While the planet's population struggled to process what they were seeing, Captain Rodriguez's fleet engaged the orbital defenses using tactics no Draconian commander could have anticipated. Instead of ship-to-ship combat, the humans deployed cargo containers filled with industrial equipment converted into weapons. Mining robots became boarding parties. Construction equipment became siege engines. Civilian shuttles packed with explosives became guided missiles. General Vorthake's flagship, a dreadnought that had conquered 17 worlds, found itself being boarded by human construction workers wielding plasma torches and improvised armor made from shipping containers. The concept of civilians fighting professional soldiers was so alien to Draconian thinking that their defensive systems hadn't been designed to handle it. On the Mantid collective homeworld, General Webb's forces employed a completely different approach. Instead of direct assault, they had spent weeks infiltrating the planet's underground tunnel systems using modified mining equipment. The mantid species lived in vast hive complexes connected by hundreds of thousands of kilometers of tunnels, perfect for the guerrilla warfare tactics that Webb had perfected. The mantid collective's greatest strength became their fatal weakness. Their hive-mind consciousness allowed perfect coordination between billions of individuals, but it also meant that disrupting any major node could cause cascading failures throughout the entire system. Webb's forces didn't attack military targets. Instead, they targeted the biological infrastructure that supported the hive mind, power distribution networks, atmospheric processing systems, and the neural relay stations that allowed collective consciousness to function across planetary distances. When Ambassador Crixtal tried to coordinate her species' defense, she found herself cut off from vast sections of her own consciousness. Individual mantids, suddenly isolated from the collective for the first time in their lives, experienced something approaching panic. Many simply shut down rather than face the terror of individual thought. The humans exploited this psychological vulnerability ruthlessly. Webb's forces broadcast individualistic human philosophy directly into mantid neural networks. Concepts like personal freedom, individual initiative, and independent decision-making spread like a virus through the collective consciousness, causing entire hive sections to become paralyzed by conflicting individual desires. On the Ethereal Consortium's dimensional nexus, the attack took a form that defied physics itself. Dar. Vasquez had discovered that human brains, while appearing chaotic to psychic examination, actually generated a form of quantum static that interfered with energy-based consciousness. The human strike force didn't bring weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, they brought 3,000 volunteers, individuals selected for their mental instability, creativity, and emotional intensity. Artists, musicians, poets, and writers whose minds operated in ways that even other humans found difficult to understand. When Counselor Zephyr attempted to repel the human invasion using psychic domination, she found herself confronted by the collective unconscious of humanity's most imaginative individuals. The sheer creative chaos of human artistic consciousness proved toxic to beings of pure organized energy. The ethereal consortium's carefully maintained dimensional stability began to collapse as human creativity introduced random elements into their quantum matrix. Zephyr watched in horror as her species' ordered existence dissolved into artistic chaos, their realm literally transformed into something resembling human surrealist art. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated with endless variation. Each human strike force adapted their tactics to exploit the specific weaknesses of their targets. The Silicon Brotherhood's logical consciousness was overwhelmed by deliberate human irrationality. The Aquatic Federation's fluid coordination was disrupted by human inflexibility. The Void Dancer's multidimensional existence was anchored to normal space by human weapons designed to function regardless of dimensional phase. But it was the psychological warfare that proved most effective. Every alien species discovered that humans had been imagining scenarios like this for millennia, and in every case, human fiction provided tactical guidance for the reality. The crystalline hegemony found themselves fighting enemies who seemed to know exactly how to shatter living crystal using sonic weapons calibrated to specific harmonic frequencies. The collective of ascended minds faced humans who had developed mental discipline specifically designed to resist psychic influence. The Empire of Infinite Night discovered that humans had evolved perfect countermeasures for fighting in absolute darkness. Coalition morale collapsed as reports filtered back from their homeworlds. These weren't just military defeats, they were cultural and psychological catastrophes. Human tactical innovations challenged every assumption about warfare, civilization, and species development that galactic society had maintained for thousands of years. The breaking point came when Admiral Kane's main fleet arrived in the Sol system, not to defend Earth, but to reveal what humanity had been building while the galaxy's attention was focused elsewhere. The Coalition's final desperate assault on Earth involved 30 species and 15,000 warships, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. They expected to find a primitive world defended by the remnants of humanity's space fleet. Instead, they found that Earth had become a fortress world that made their own military installations look primitive by comparison. Every asteroid in the system had been converted into a weapons platform. The Moon's far side concealed manufacturing facilities that had been producing warships for decades. Mars had been hollowed out and converted into a single massive military base. But most shocking of all was the human fleet that emerged from Jupiter's radiation shadow, not the 2,000 ships that intelligence had reported, but over 10,000 vessels of completely new design. Humanity had been preparing for this war since first contact with galactic civilization, building a military infrastructure hidden throughout their home system. The Coalition force found itself surrounded and outgunned in humanity's home territory. For the first time in galactic history, a coalition of 42 species faced the possibility of complete military defeat at the hands of a single, primitive, species. General Vorthake, his own flagship crippled and his empire's homeworld under human occupation, sent the surrender signal that would echo through galactic history: we yield to the apex predators. Following action, New Galactic Order. The surrender negotiations took place aboard Admiral Kane's flagship, the Indomitable, orbiting Earth. Representatives from 42 species sat in restraints designed for their various physiologies, facing a human delegation that seemed almost casual in their complete dominance of the situation. General Vorthake, his magnificent scales now dulled with defeat, looked at Kane with something approaching respect. We underestimated your species completely. We expected to fight another civilized race. Instead, we awakened something that should have remained dormant. Kane's response was typically human, pragmatic and forward-looking. You attacked our colonies and tried to exterminate our species. In any previous era of human history, we would have responded by exterminating yours. Instead, we're offering you the opportunity to surrender with honor and join a new galactic order. The concept of mercy from a victorious enemy was so alien to most coalition species that they initially couldn't process it. Ambassador Crixtal, her collective consciousness still fragmented from Webb's psychological assault, struggled to understand why humans weren't simply executing their defeated enemies. Your species finds satisfaction in forgiveness, she asked, the concept barely translatable into mantid communication protocols. We find satisfaction in winning, Kane replied. Exterminating 42 species would be wasteful. Converting 42 former enemies into allies serves humanity's long-term interests much better. The rehabilitation programs that followed shocked the galactic community even more than humanity's military victory. Instead of the concentration camps or slavery that defeated species typically faced, humans established educational facilities designed to help former coalition members adapt to the new galactic order. Draconian warriors found themselves studying human military history, learning tactics that emphasized adaptation over rigid doctrine. Many became some of humanity's most effective military advisors, their natural warrior instincts enhanced by human strategic flexibility. The Mantid Collective underwent the most dramatic transformation. Exposure to human individualism had fractured their hive mind permanently, but instead of collapsing, many Mantids discovered that individual consciousness brought unexpected advantages. Former Ambassador Crixtal became one of the galaxy's leading experts on hybrid collective individual decision-making systems. Counselor Zephyr and the surviving ethereal consortium found their ordered existence permanently altered by contact with human creativity, but the result was an explosion of artistic and philosophical innovation that revolutionized their species' development. They became humanity's closest collaborators in exploring the intersection of consciousness and reality. The technological integration proceeded at an unprecedented pace. Human engineers, working with alien scientists who now understood the value of chaotic thinking, created hybrid technologies that surpassed anything either species had achieved independently. Human adaptive engineering combined with alien theoretical knowledge produced innovations that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Dr. Vasquez's research teams, now augmented with the best minds from 42 species, began developing technologies that treated the galaxy itself as a laboratory. Weapons that could manipulate time, shields that existed in parallel dimensions, and propulsion systems that made faster-than-light travel seem primitive. But the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy had to confront the reality that its assumptions about evolution, civilization, and species development had been fundamentally wrong. Humanity represented a different evolutionary path, not more advanced in the traditional sense, but adapted for survival in ways that civilized species had forgotten. General Webb established the Galactic Military Academy on Luna, where officers from every species learned human tactical doctrines. The curriculum was revolutionary. Instead of the systematic approaches favored by most species, students learned to embrace uncertainty, adapt to changing circumstances, and think as individuals within coordinated frameworks. The psychological impact on galactic society was profound. Species that had achieved technological advancement through collective consciousness, logical thinking, or psychic coordination discovered that human chaos was actually a sophisticated adaptive system. Random decision-making, emotional responses, and individual initiative weren't signs of primitive development, they were evolutionary advantages that had allowed humans to thrive in environments that would destroy more advanced species. Trade relationships were re-established with humanity holding clear dominance but exercising it with restraint. Human colonies received preferential access to alien technology, while former coalition worlds gained access to human adaptive engineering and tactical innovations. The result was an economic boom that lifted the entire galaxy to new heights of prosperity. Most importantly, the new galactic order was built on mutual respect rather than traditional power structures. Humanity had proven that they were the galaxy's apex predators, but they chose to use that position to create a more stable and prosperous civilization rather than simply dominating their former enemies. The transformation was visible throughout human space. Earth became the de facto galactic capital, not through conquest but through demonstrated capability. The Sol system evolved into a massive diplomatic and military complex where representatives from hundreds of species worked together under human leadership. Admiral Kane, now holding the newly created position of Galactic Supreme Commander, established principles that would govern interspecies relations for centuries: strength through diversity, security through preparedness, and peace through the demonstrated ability to wage total war if necessary. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in its history: never underestimate a species that had evolved to survive against impossible odds, and never threaten the extinction of apex predators unless you're prepared for them to respond with everything they've learned about warfare over millions of years of evolution. Conclusion: the war they never expected. 5 years after the end of what historians would call the Great Awakening, Ambassador Krixtal stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching human and alien engineers work side by side on the construction of a new class of exploration vessel. Her individual consciousness, still a marvel to her species, contemplated the irony of their situation. "We came to eliminate what we saw as a threat to galactic civilization," she mused to General Vorthake, who had become one of humanity's most trusted military advisors. "Instead, we discovered that we were the ones who needed to evolve." Vorthake's massive head turned toward the construction site where his own species worked alongside the humans they had once tried to exterminate. "They showed us something we had forgotten in our millennia of civilized development. Survival isn't about achieving perfection, it's about maintaining the ability to adapt when perfection fails." The new galactic order was built on principles that no species had imagined before humanity's victory. Instead of the rigid hierarchies and specialized roles that had characterized previous galactic civilization, the human model emphasized flexibility, cross-training, and a constant preparation for unexpected challenges. Every species now maintained what humans called survival reserves, military capabilities, emergency protocols, and adaptive technologies designed to function when normal systems failed. The galaxy had learned that true security came not from eliminating threats, but from maintaining the ability to overcome any threat that might arise. Counselor Zephyr materialized beside them, her energy form now incorporating chaotic elements that made her more creative and adaptable than any previous ethereal. "The humans gave us the greatest gift possible," she observed. "They showed us that consciousness doesn't have to choose between order and chaos. It can embrace both." The philosophical implications were still being explored by scholars throughout the galaxy. Humanity had demonstrated that species could achieve advanced technology while maintaining their evolutionary survival instincts. Civilization didn't require the abandonment of adaptive capabilities, it could be enhanced by them. The Mantid Collective had become the Mantid Cooperative, with former hive minds learning to balance collective wisdom with individual innovation. The Silicon Brotherhood had incorporated illogical thinking into their crystalline matrices, achieving computational breakthroughs that pure logic had made impossible. The Aquatic Federation's fluid coordination now included deliberate randomness that made them unpredictable to potential enemies. Dr. Vasquez, now director of the Galactic Research Institute, had established a simple principle that guided all technological development: every system must be designed to function when everything else fails. Human engineering philosophy, redundancy, adaptability, and the assumption that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, had become the galactic standard. But perhaps the most important change was cultural. The galaxy's entertainment industry had been revolutionized by human concepts of dramatic tension, individual heroism, and victory against impossible odds. Species that had never imagined conflict now consumed human war stories, learning to think about challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats to be avoided. Children throughout the galaxy grew up playing games that would have horrified previous generations, scenarios where they had to overcome superior enemies through cunning, determination, and tactical innovation. The human concept of training for the worst-case scenario had become universal educational doctrine. Admiral Kane, now in her 70s but showing no signs of slowing down, had established the Galactic Defense Protocol, a system designed to ensure that no species would ever again face extinction because they were unprepared for warfare. Every world maintained emergency militias, every civilian learned basic combat skills, and every industry was designed to convert to military production within days if necessary. The protocol was tested regularly through massive war games that involved entire sectors of the galaxy. Species that had lived in peace for millennia now practiced coordination for conflicts that might never come. The galaxy had learned humanity's most important lesson: the price of survival is eternal vigilance. Trade flowed freely between worlds, but every merchant vessel was armed and every trade route was protected by mixed-species military patrols. Exploration continued at an unprecedented pace, but every exploration mission included military specialists prepared for contact with potentially hostile civilizations. The galaxy had become, in essence, a scaled-up version of human civilization, peaceful by preference, but prepared for total war if necessary. The result was a golden age of prosperity and expansion that made previous galactic achievements seem primitive by comparison. As the three former enemies watched human and alien workers complete another marvel of hybrid engineering, they reflected on the lesson that had cost 42 species their independence but granted them something far more valuable: the knowledge that they could survive anything the universe might send against them. General Vorthake spoke the words that had become the unofficial motto of the new galactic order: "We are no longer the species we were when we tried to eliminate humanity. We have become something better, we have become worthy allies of the galaxy's apex predators." The war they had expected to last 72 hours had indeed changed everything, just not in the way they had planned. Instead of eliminating humanity, they had awakened their own dormant survival instincts. Instead of destroying a threat to galactic civilization, they had discovered that humanity was exactly what galactic civilization needed to evolve beyond its comfortable stagnation. The galaxy was no longer a collection of advanced but complacent species managing their territories according to ancient traditions. It had become a community of adaptive, prepared, and perpetually improving civilizations, all trained by humanity's example to never again make the mistake of underestimating an opponent, or of assuming that technological advancement was a substitute for the will to survive. In the end, the coalition's greatest victory had been their defeat. They had set out to eliminate humanity and instead had been transformed into something worthy of fighting alongside the species that had taught them the true meaning of strength. The war they never expected had given them exactly what they never knew they needed: the chance to become apex predators themselves.